Let's go. Another one. Roll the cameras. We're going to go with day 4. We're going to go with another positional opening here. And my president would play c4. I don't even know if this is Bush or Clinton. Anyways, I did not have relations with that woman. Now, e6 is a move, and this offers a transposition to the French. But if you're a d4 player, you're under no obligation to play e4. And you can play this just as you would against any other move, against knight f6 or d5. You can just play c4, and this has very high transpositional potential. So black can transpose to a queen's gambit. This is not a transposition to anything. I've never seen this move before. It's some sort of weird Benko gambit. b5. So this is going to be a good lesson in combating obscure offbeat openings. Okay, now obviously we should take that pawn. I mean, I don't know what he's going to do. I guess, okay, d5. Maybe he looked up some line. I don't really know. Thank you, Andras, 34 people. This is incredibly strange. It's some sort of a pawn sacrifice. I've never seen this before. And hey, Zviad, good to see you. And honestly, there isn't anything special that you should do here. You should just develop your pieces, and you shouldn't spend too long agonizing over why is he playing this or what is this. Just develop your pieces. So what does that look like in this position? How should we proceed? How should we proceed? Yeah, knight f3 or knight c3. I like knight c. I would prefer knight c3 because knight c3 protects the b5 pawn. So in case he plays a move like a6 or even bishop d7, we want to have that pawn well protected. Also, maybe we'll want to play e4. So knight c3 is a somewhat more flexible developing move. Okay, knight f6. Now, we can play knight f3. That's fine. We can also develop this bishop. If we were to develop this bishop, where would you propose that we put it? Where would you propose that we put this bishop? Slightly tricky question, because I imagine that some of you might be thinking about g5. But bishop g5 in such situations is not very dangerous because of bishop e7. Notice how the pawn on b5 clamps down on this backward pawn on c7. And if he ever goes c6, then literally he allows us to liquidate the b pawn, resulting in us being a pawn up. So I think bishop f4 is quite nice because it puts serious pressure on the c7 pawn. And if he goes bishop d6, then I would be very glad to trade these bishops and either give him doubled pawns or or just trade a pair of pieces, which is good because we're up a pawn. Okay, now e3 is obvious. Bishop d3, ideal development for our pieces here. Yeah, let's go e3. Let's get the bishop out to d3. And then let's get the knight out as well. Now this is a great position for us. Knight d7. Now, the only reason I hesitate slightly to play knight f3, those among you who are London players should know the reason why you just need to verify that it's okay. What kind of slightly annoying move does black have? So it's not e5. e5 is well protected. Knight h5 is what I'm thinking about. But in this situation, knight h5 is not dangerous at all. Simply because we can either just leave the bishop on f4, or we can drop it back to g3. But in the spirit of playing very positionally, in the spirit of not allowing any kind of counterplay, what would be a good insertion here? What would be a good inclusion just to make sure this isn't a headache? Yeah, let's just go h3. You can afford it, right? You can afford a move like h3 because of how passively he's played. Now you don't have to worry about knight h5. You're going to have bishop h2. So this is a judgment call you got to make. Like, can I afford something like that? All right, knight b6. So rather than automatically castling, we have a somewhat better move. We can continue clamping down in the center. This is basically a move that plays itself. There's no huge rush to castle. Okay, b3 would weaken the c3 knight and allow a move like bishop b4. There's no need to stop knight c4 that directly. I'm thinking about knight e5, centralizing the knight, and look at how we are clamping on his position. And this also discourages knight c4, adding in a defender. Okay, now, again, this is much easier if you are a d4 player, if you've played the Queen's Gambit. these moves should all be very natural to you. So the move that I'm thinking of right now is queen to c2, creating a little battery. I'm positive that many of you are tempted to play knight c6. And the more I think about it, the more I like it. No, I like knight c6. I like knight c6 a lot. The reason I was hesitating to play it initially, and after the game I'm going to talk about this concept a little bit more in depth. These very tempting moves that create threats can look incredibly good, but then take a look at this knight on c6. It's supported by a pawn, so you think this is the best knight in the world, right? This is an amazing knight. But if you look at it a little bit more carefully, how can black try to undermine this knight in the future? Yeah, bishop e5 is excellent here. a6, and then you'd have to play a4, and that would open up the a file. And we're talking here about positions that are all going to be good, but we want to eliminate as many headaches as possible. So unless you have a specific follow-up move here that creates more threats, knight c6 is not as good as it looks. Also, he can play bishop b7 and chase this knight away. Now, what does this move look like? Christian, you actually found it. I'm looking at this knight. I've noticed that as a result of these last two moves, the knight on f6 has lost the protection of the queen. So we can use this bishop to pose a threat against this knight. Bishop g5 is good. Even better move, a really sexy move, is bishop e5. Because after bishop takes, d takes, the knight is going to be trapped. It doesn't have the retreat square to d7. And the e4 square is protected twice and only attacked once. We are threatening, of course, to cripple totally his pawn structure on the king side, which in the context of the fact that he's castled there is very important, as I've talked about many times. And we don't have to rush with bishop takes f6. We can also pile up the pressure even further with queen f3. Then bishop takes f6 becomes an even greater threat. And I like that a lot. Queen f3 is even more clinical because now we're threatening to take twice on f6, right? You know, maybe you're thinking, but wait a second, aren't we giving up a pawn here? Well, first of all, we can take on f6. But second of all, okay, so he correctly doesn't take the pawn. Wow, because we would have had bishop b5 there. All right, so now we don't have to do anything at all, because if we take the knight, then he takes with the queen. And, you know, even though we do technically ruin his structure, it comes at the cost of a queen trade, which I don't want. So what would be a good move to hold the tension here? How would we want to hold the tension? Yeah, do nothing, but, okay, but you might as well develop. So you might as well just castle. And then perhaps moves like rook c1 just to support the pawn are good. This guy is good. I might have to speed up a little bit. Rook c1, knight b5, putting pressure on the queen side. There's many ways of doing it. It goes knight c4, which is not scary because we can just take this knight. And as a result of this trade, notice how this pawn has become a very serious weakness, right? So what should we do on the basis of that? Very sort of logical play. I just gave you a hint. I just gave you guys a very big hint. But why rook c1? Is there a direct way to attack the queen e2? Directly attack the pawn. Your first order of business should be to ask yourself, is there a direct way to accomplish whatever it is I want to accomplish? Then, if the answer is no, moves like rook c1 come to mind. But this wins the second pawn, and the rest is going to be a matter of technique. No, it doesn't ruin my structure. It's just one pair of doubled pawns. It only looks that way, but it's only one pair of doubled pawns. That's nothing I can't deal with. Particularly since now we win a second pawn, obviously. Furthermore, I like the way this pawn is positioned because it clamps down on all these central squares. So what should we do now? What's the next order of business? Next order of business is to bring our pieces into the game in an efficient manner. Now, which rook should we put on d1? A rook or F rook. As I like to advise in these positions, when you're deciding which rook to put on a square, you need to take a look at the other rook. Ask yourself if the other rook is going to have a good square, or if one of the rooks is going to be hogging all of the prime real estate. Well, if you ask yourself rook e1, that other rook is only going to have e1, and that's a pretty lame square. It doesn't want to go there. It's not doing anything there. If the F rook goes to d1, the other rook is at least going to have c1, where it's not ideal. It's not distributing the COVID vaccine or climbing Mount Everest, but at least it's supporting that c6 pawn. Okay, so we're going to have to play a little bit faster here. Where do we want our queen? Well, ideally, we'd want it on a very active square. And the most active square is a6. I like the idea of going queen a6 and potentially just going in for the kill with queen b7. So many good squares there. I like a6 though. This is a winning position. He's played very, very well though to hold on for as long as he has. Okay, so he's attacking 2 pawns at the same time. And we could take and take, but then he takes and our queen gets in a little bit of trouble. So I like to move queen b5 here, dropping the queen back and offering the queen trade and simultaneously protecting these 2 pawns. So this is, you know, I'm trying to play as clinically as possible given our time situation because I don't want this to get a little bit out of hand. Now we have an opportunity to trade both pairs of rooks. In general, we want to trade because we're up 2 pawns. Let's do it. We could even pre-move rook d1. Because if he had taken with the queen, we would have still done that. This essentially forces the rook trade. If he doesn't trade, he gives us the d file, which is a big deal. Yeah, I have to say this guy is very good. He's somewhat underrated, but I think we're doing a good job of keeping his counterplay at bay. I think I'll be fine without increment. It's just that I might have to... Okay, so this is a... It's not technically a mistake, but what can we do here? How should we paralyze him? This just feels like a very passive move, so we should take this opportunity to really squeeze the most out of the position. Okay, it's not queen c5 because he takes on d1 with check. Yeah, so we want to go queen b8, but wait, don't rush. Instead of going queen b8 immediately... Why don't we take the rook first, trading as we wanted previously, and then after queen takes, we put the queen on b8, paralyze him completely, and this gives us the opportunity now to move in for the kill. Now, what does it even mean to move in for the kill here? There's one move that wins the game immediately. What am I talking about? Knight b5. Now, you would want to check, no pun intended, to make sure that this check is not dangerous. It isn't. King h2. And... now you could take with a queen. This leads to a queen trade and almost for sure a win. And honestly, I don't see a reason not to do that. Just trade queens. If you're low on time, this makes it a lot easier to win the resulting endgame. Right? You could also have taken with the knight, but now we're up 3 pawns. And what you want to make sure you don't do is allow black's knight to get active. So he's probably going to go knight b6. Okay, where is the knight going? It's going to c4. So even though you're in time pressure, you can still play prophylactic moves. b3 is a very simple move. It's a very good move because it keeps his knight at bay. Now, you could go anywhere with your knight. I like knight a6. I like knight b5. I like knight a6 even more because it paralyzes him completely. Now I'm going to paralyze him even further. Look at this e4. His knight has no squares. It doesn't have d5. It doesn't have c4. It can only go between a8 and b6. And now I'm going to drive the pawns in even further. And as I'm doing that, I'm starting to think about the winning plan. The winning plan here is very straightforward. All you have to do is bring the king into c5 unhurriedly. Unhurriedly bring in the queen. I mean, if he goes knight c7, obviously we take, and we win the pawn endgame very straightforwardly. We're up 2 pawns. Now, what's going to be the winning plan? Winning plan is simple. You want to create a passed pawn on the queen side, making sure that on the king side, you don't allow any shenanigans. That's it. You're just going to advance the pawns, making sure you don't allow any shenanigans. One shenanigan could be h4, which with the move of 1 pawn freezes both of our pawns. We don't want to allow that. So we could go g4, but I like going g3. We can keep our options open. When people say don't hurry in the endgame, that's what they mean. You can play g4 whenever you want, but you might not have an opportunity to do that if you allow him to go h4, but maybe you don't want to do it. So you keep your options totally open. Okay, so we have many ways to win this position. One of them, as I'll show you guys, one of them is going to be to stalemate his king. This is a classic winning plan in such positions, to stalemate his king, and then to force him. You'll see what I'm doing. You could also go to c5 and d6 and win, but I want to show you this particular technique because it's nice. Now, here's going to be the idea, the high-level idea. I'm going to stalemate his king, And in doing so, I'm going to force him to start giving away his pawns. Understood? And I'm going to take the right amount of pawns in order to continue giving him moves. You don't want to take all of his pawns because that's stalemate. You want to take as many pawns as it takes. Okay, so we take, he still has a move. How should we go about winning this? So white to play and win. Who can tell me the actual mating moves here? So g6 is fine. We can play g6 because we give him more moves. Then g7, making sure it's not stalemate. He's got this move. And g8 queen. This is a little bit less safe than the other method, but I wanted to show you what this looks like. Okay. All right. So let's take a look. I know, guys. It's all for show. I mean, I was under control. So this was a nice positional game. Now, again, e6 is a move that throws a lot of d4 players out. They think, man, do I have to go e4? Like, what is this? But this is just a move with a very high transpositional potential, which just means that it's got some independent value. You could transpose from this line to any other to openings that only involve the move e6. The most common of them is bishop b4 check. This is sort of a weird BOGO Indian. Sometimes the knight goes to e7 here, although this could also transpose into a regular BOGO Indian. You could also play kind of a weird Benoni, which could also then again transpose to a regular Benoni. So you guys get the point. You could go b6. That's another sort of independent line, delaying the development of the knight. It's kind of a hacky, weirdish kind of opening, but there are some players who are very well known for it. If you're black, you got to be ready to play a French. So if you're not a French player, this is way too risky because you might be playing somebody who's also an e4 player. Okay. So b5 is honestly garbage, and his follow-up to it was garbage too, because at least if you're playing b5, play it like a Benko Gambit, go a6. And at least here you can have some sort of counterplay down the A and B files as you do in a Benko Gambit. I'm checking to see if b5 has ever been played before. I'm sure it has. It has. It's been played in a handful of games. Yuri Shulman? No, that's a mistake. It's been played by some reasonable players, by like some 1900s, but it's virtually never been played. So CB A6. And now, according to the engine, the best move for white is just to play e4 here and occupy the center. And it's like plus 1.5. And after AB bishop b5, you know, you have the center. Black doesn't have any serious compensation. This is crap. Elite is I saw another one this morning. I was walking around downtown, and they had been climbing. This elitist gatekeeper climbed up the tallest building. And I just took him down immediately. The smell of elitist gatekeepers is such a stench, honestly. They're all over the place, man. They're infesting American society. All right, they're taking over the world, basically. They're the greatest threat to, you know, the global stability, honestly. These elitist gatekeepers. Okay. So knight c3, knight f6, bishop f4. Okay, so does it make sense? I hope it makes sense that you want to develop the bishop here and not to g5. Because the bishop is doing something here. It's pressuring c7 on g5. Your bishop g5, bishop e7. I'm not a huge fan of this situation over here. All right. The bishop f4, e3, bishop d3, supernatural development here. Nothing to see. Again, this is a tiny bit annoying. I certainly don't want to give away this bishop for, you know, for no positional compensation. If you've allowed this, at least drop the bishop back to g3 so you get the h file for it. But black can also delay knight takes g3, and then you get into this cat and mouse game where if you castle, then black takes on g3, and then you no longer have a rook on h1, right? So you always have to ask yourself, if you're bogged down in these kind of thoughts, like, do I even need to allow all of this? Can I not just play h3, just like you do in the London, create some luft for the bishop? Here, knight b6, knight e5. Castling long is... No, I wouldn't be comfortable castling long with white. See, what can happen if you castle long let's say black plays bishop b7, you castle long. This move that black has played b5 is now justified. Black could open up another file, a6, and you could end up asking for trouble here with white. Notice how the b and the a files are semi-open files. Black could open up the c file with c5, so this would really invite kind of attack for black. Well, Sayward, not really. I mean, you're asking me, I think you're asking who does this benefit, but the h file being open doesn't benefit anybody here. It doesn't really benefit white because you can't really get a rook on the h file. And what I'm saying is I don't want to part ways with the dark squared bishop because now this just gives black the two bishops, and why would you want to do that in the first place, right? So h3, rook e, knight f3. Okay, I mean, I'm not really commenting on his moves. He's playing fine, but very passive. Bishop d6. Now, if I were in, if I were playing a game against another GM, I'd probably just castle and then go like rook c1, queen f3, make improving moves. But here we decided to go for something more, with a little bit more pizzazz. Knight c6 and bishop e5. So this is an important move. If it doesn't make sense, let me know. But the point is, you're threatening to ruin black's pawn structure, and essentially the bishop is untouchable because the knight is going to be trapped, necessitating knight e4, which gives up another pawn and gets this bishop to a beautiful square. So bishop b7, now queen f3, another important move. Taking immediately, just not that effective. A lot of people go into a position like this. Very commonly missed idea is this move f5, intercepting the bishop. So just always have to be very careful about that. But if we had gone for this position, what would have been the proper way for white to continue? This is still winning for white, provided that you play with great aggression, nice g4, and I think white's got a devastating attack. So maybe this was even the best approach to the position. So maybe queen f3 was unnecessary. No, Sudarati, it's still okay to castle. This is not a disaster. So just to be clear, good question. Is this a disaster? This is not a disaster for white. It doesn't really favor either side. This is a little bit of a damaged pawn structure, but it's nothing. Black's not getting a rook to the h file, that's for sure, right? So you don't have to worry about it. You don't have to change your plans if you allow this by accident. But it's just undesirable if you can prevent it. So takes. Now, could somebody tell me what the point was after queen takes c6? I already said that, I think, during the game, though. But who can remind me what the most accurate move for white is? What's the simplest? Yeah, so good example of tunnel vision would be taking twice, which is good. But bishop b5 is simpler, winning the exchange. You could perhaps take on f6 first. Yeah, taking on f6 first is good. gf6, then you take, and then you take, and you're up in exchange in a pawn. All right. So queen e7, we castle. I think knight c4 was a further mistake because it allows us to win a second pawn. If I were black, I would go rook a to b8, for example, just some neutral move. And now I like b3 quite a lot, a move that was previously suggested, just to completely limit the knight. Notice the situation Robert likes to talk about when there's two squares between a knight and a pawn on the same file. That means the pawn is totally limiting the knight's ability to move forward. But here, a lot of you are suggesting rook a c1, which is a good move. There's nothing wrong with rook a c1, but queen e2, just far more direct, attacking c4. Black had an opportunity to play rook a to b8 here, which I would have done if I were black in this position, because after queen takes c4, rook b2, black limits the material losses. So what should white do here? What should white do in this position? And this is a great example of violating a positional rule in order to achieve a specific aim. Yeah, so rook a b1 is, I think, in this position very good because, yes, you're tying down the rook to the pawn temporarily, but you're doing that for a specific reason. You want to free up the queen. If black plays rook b4, then you go a3. The rook cannot go to a4, and so you have to give up the pawn. So this is a great example of what I mentioned previously, which is that at this rating, we are beginning to violate certain rules or principles because the concrete aims of the position demand it. And you can no longer operate on general principles alone. Knight a4 I don't like because Knight a4, rook b4 becomes strong because it attacks the knight. Rook b1 is a more robust way of defending this pawn here, if that makes sense. So, yeah. So that's what makes it hard sometimes to find the best move. So now we win a second pawn. Queen a6 is really nice, pressuring the a7 pawn, threatening to go to b7, dropping it back to b5, and defending both pawns, using the opportunity to trade as many pieces as possible. Okay, knight c8 was bad, but it doesn't even really matter. Infiltration, knight b5, winning a third pawn. b3, notice, limiting the knight, stopping knight c4, stopping knight d5, and the rest is very simple. Bring the king in. Okay, he went knight c7. If he just continued to shuffle, what we would have... I mean, first of all, you can just go to e7 and win all his pawns. But if you also want, you can go like this and literally look at this position. Like, the knight can't move. And then you're just going to bring the pawn all the way up to b7. Rook 88 saving the f rook for something like f4. Oh, you mean when I did this? Wait, you mean... Why didn't I go here save? Because I don't think I'm going to play f4. See, Godnog asked a good question. Having seen you rip open f files with pawn breaks, why didn't you like rook 81 saving the f rook for f4, f5? So the reason is because I'm making a judgment call about how I think the game is going to unfold. This judgment call might be wrong, and how many times have I put a rook on a square and regretted that I didn't put the other rook on that square? 1,000,000 times. How do I think the game is going to unfold? I see that the d file is wide open. There's rooks on the d file. So in my mind, I'm anticipating a scenario where rooks are going to get traded. I don't really see the necessity of trying to get this f file attack going because I'm already up 2 pawns. I've done my job. Now all I need to do is trade more pieces. So it's all about how you think the game's going to unfold. How do you prepare your pieces maximally for the way in which you think the game is going to continue? And that involves doing some guesswork and consulting your intuition and stuff. Thank you, WU, for the prime. Why is queen a6 so nice? So, first of all, like, queens on the rim are sometimes good. Like, I wouldn't really make a principle out of it. Like, knights on the rim are grim. Queens on the rim can be good. The reason the queen is good here is because of how much it's accomplishing. It's pressuring a7, which is good because that might lead, you can see how if you take the rook and black takes, then you might lose a third pawn. So that's 1. C over, thank you. And also, notice how this pawn is very weak, right, on c7. The queen could potentially migrate over to b7 and, sort of put pressure on this pawn. So in this particular instance, and it's also unassailable. The queen on a6 is impossible to attack with any of black's pieces, which is a pretty big deal. If we had put the queen like on b5, maybe black could have gone a6. So I just think it's nice for several reasons. Okay, so takes, rook d1, and then after this the game is over. Why not knight b5 instead of castling to threaten the bishop? Let me go back. Let me see. Why not knight b5 instead of castling, asks Bav many times over. Oh, knight b5 here. So knight b5 doesn't actually threaten his bishop. And in addition, it allows this nasty check on b4. Right? And you might have to drop the knight back to I don't really want to... It's not a disaster to play king f1. I don't really like. But why allow this kind of counterplay? You see what I'm saying? And then maybe rook e to c8. Maybe rook e to c8. Yeah, I'm glad people are learning. When the knight for bishop trade occurs after kingside castles, is f takes g3 worse? Well, f takes g3 makes more damage to the pawn structure. Yeah, like f takes g3 would also create this backward pawn on e3. Ugh, that's pretty disgusting. So, f takes g3 is sometimes good when you want to open up the f file and stuff. So yeah. All right, guys, I think I'm gonna call it. I'm gonna call it a night. I'm pretty tired, so I'm definitely gonna be back. So tomorrow my schedule eases up, so we're gonna be doing more. As I said, Monday through Wednesday are my like very intense teaching days. Then I've got more time, Thursday, Friday, weekend, to get stuff done and to do more streaming. So I will do my best to return tomorrow first half of the day, I'll do a stream. For sure. Thank you, God Nug, for the 500. Of course, no problem. It's my pleasure. And I promise to do some more speedrunning then. Yeah. So that's about it, guys. And I will try tomorrow to be back after my workout. So about 2:30 p.m. Eastern time, I'll be back for a midday stream. And we're going to do some more blitz and more speedrunning and more fun. Thank you for hanging out, guys. I really appreciate it. And take care, guys. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Goodbye for now.